I like to do introductions this way. I ask ChatGPT if it knows who you are. And so I
Okay.
said, tell me what you know about Nick Marks. And there's actually a lot here. Nick Marks is a Melbourne born, New York based composer, producer, pianist, and multi instrumentalist known for blending jazz, electronica, neo soul, funk, Latin, and cinematic textures into what he dubs cinematic jazz tronica. And it goes on to say more about the background and training, more about the musical style and output. Acclaim and collaborations is a category of the answer. Online presence also described here. And then at the end, there is a summary that talks about your strong foundation in classical jazz piano, self-taught composing, distinctive sound, and ongoing cinematic chromatic series and singles like Durango and Ride the Dragon underscores creative depth. And I can then, it prompts me to if I'd like to know more about specific albums or things like that. Um, how accurate is all of that, would you say?
Scarily accurate. I would maybe make one little note that to call myself a multi-instrumentalist would maybe a bit of a stretch. I'm a keys piano player of, you know, many descriptions of many types of keyboards. So yeah, don't know if I play any other instruments though, but I write for other instruments. Can play synth bass, you know, but yeah, I need a keyboard to play something.
Awesome. So I'm going to introduce why we're here with you today. The reason we're here with you is I know you through Rise, and we've met in person, and it's been great collaborating with you, and not just working on campaigns, but really also just talking about the industry and life and music and solving problems and all of that, which has been great for me and really rewarding. So thank you for that. Um,
Man, thank you for having me.
And what we want to do is share with the Rise community a little bit about your story, kind of where you came from, where you're at in your journey, and some of the stuff that you've learned. As I told you the other day, the thing that I really like to do is give independent artists some sort of a takeaway or something from your story that they might be able to learn and relate to in some way that might be able to help them. And if we help one person, that's all that matters. If we help 100 people or 1,000 people, then even better.
Yeah, so maybe the overall message here is one of sustainability and how you keep navigating an ever-changing, you know, industry, and especially for those of us who are, you know, doing a lot of this kind of by our own bootstraps. It's important to also find community like the one that you provided with Rise. So yeah, like Mr. or Mrs. I don't know what you call ChatGPT. Does it even have a gender? I don't know. So ChatGPT, it was pretty accurate in terms of my background, but I'll just kind of dive in a little deeper. Um, so yeah, I kind of came from like a playing background, you know, like doing jazz. Went to conservatory in Australia, and I took a lot of classical training, kind of just all on my own. That kind of, you know, grew into me doing a lot of live performing in all sorts of gigs. Uh, just sort of serendipitously landed into like composing worlds and scoring and doing all that kind of thing. And then just I started to get involved in a lot of people's projects. So I'd be scoring someone's film here, doing some TV thing there, and then I'd be playing some neo soul gig there, and maybe musical directing something else. So you know, that I was kind of like I was the invisible hands behind a lot of projects. That was, you know, a lot of fun and very exciting. One thing that actually happened though was I found that as an artist, um, I was getting, you know, a lot of nice feedback from the people I worked with, but that didn't translate into being known in the wider sort of, you know, world of music listeners and, you know, fans, let's just say. People would often say to me, "Oh, where can I find your music?" And I would sort of, you know, have that moment of like the deer in the headlights, like, I don't actually have a Spotify yet. So I don't know if maybe some artists who are kind of starting out in the community, you know, you can probably, maybe this resonates, you can be active, you can be doing a lot of stuff, but maybe you haven't really thought about the sort of, building the pipelines where you can actually be in control of putting out your own music and connecting with people directly through the music that you make. So yeah.
So as the banner being sustainability, I
Hmm.
think there are inevitably some people who fit this profile, and even more maybe who could be heading down this path of being an active professional musician who is playing gigs, making money, doing musical projects, in your case, scoring films and things like that as well. So you have a professional background and active career in making music, but then people would come to you and say, where can I find Nick Marks music? And you're going, oh, I just haven't set that up yet because you've been working on everybody else's thing. So there's definitely going to be some people that relate to that. And also there's definitely some people that maybe aren't there yet, but with the awareness of, hey, they could be heading down that path and being so busy and caught up in all of it to not really be thinking about building a brand or a presence online for themselves at the same time. So maybe we can catch some people early on the way there and get them to build an online presence. Um,
I think if you're really early in your journey and your main focus is like, I'm focusing on writing my songs or producing my tracks or making my beats, I think that's an excellent place to be. And don't get me wrong, like, I think it was a good thing to be focused on my craft for, you know, as long as I was, to the exclusion almost of thinking about those promotional things. Cause like, I built my chops, I'm still working on that. And by the time I got to a place where I had maybe like internally arrived, like I'm ready to put some stuff out now. I felt pretty good about the things I was putting out as I was doing it. I didn't feel like I was like, well, I don't know, I wasn't sort of second guessing the things I was putting out. I also think though, like, if I could give myself a bit of advice to my younger self, I think using different platforms to put your music out, whether it doesn't have to be, it can even be SoundCloud, it can just be Bandcamp, like something that's easy to get into or get on. I think that there can be a lot of value in seeing the work you're doing just exist and seeing how people engage with it. I think you can
yeah,
grow a lot from that.
absolutely. So um, you had this moment where people started, many moments maybe, where people started saying, what's your Spotify? Where can I find you online? You hadn't set that up yet. How long ago was that you were at quote unquote zero? You had no followers on
Yeah.
Spotify. You probably barely had a social media presence on Instagram, for example, probably no TikTok or any of that. So
Yeah.
when was that, and how did that get going?
Yeah. The point at which I started to release music and I was at zero was was officially February of 2023. So not that long ago.
Yeah, so yeah, that's just basically 2 years, not almost on the
Mm-hmm.
dot, but yeah, not long
Mm-hmm.
ago at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at the time, just by the metrics, zero Spotify profile.
Correct.
What about the rest of your online presence? What did that look like?
I had an Instagram page of about 600 followers, and most of the content I was putting out was literally a snap of a gig I played, maybe at an impressive venue or with some artists I was working with. And, I would get some engagement, but nothing of any sort of exponential growth trajectory. It was all just kind of like, well, I'm sure if I post this, people will, see it, but I don't think they really, not many people were, and TikTok, nothing. Yeah, like I didn't have a Bandcamp page. I had an old SoundCloud that was kind of like a reel, kind of doubled as a reel that I would share with, prospective producers or showrunners or whatever. But that was kind of it.
And you
Pretty humble.
obviously, yeah, and that's great because I think, I mean, literally everyone starts at zero, but
Correct.
in music, there's just an extra emphasis on zero. It's maybe different from other people in different industries, right? Because music
Right.
is extra critical, I would say. So you made the decision to start doing that just 2 years
Hmm.
ago,
Hmm.
and did you have a strategy that you decided you're going to start with, or did you start throwing things at the wall? How did you start getting momentum, and how organized was it?
It's a great question. I think it's a hybrid. So I'll take you back just to about May of 2022. I had just finished mastering a 12-track album, and I had a couple of extra tracks kind of in the pipeline. And I started to, look into actually releasing this album. But a lot of the advice and wisdom out there was, as a first time sort of like as an artist putting out music for the first time, it may not be the best most effective way just to put out this 12-track album. Like it may all just, one track will just kind of disappear in the wind of, such a saturated market on the streaming platforms. So then through
Especially
some
with no foundation, no audience,
correct,
with
absolutely
nothing.
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then basically I started to, assemble a pretty modest, sort of team of people who could advise me on some, social media strategy, people who could advise me on kind of like timing of releasing singles, things to think about in terms of like what's going on in the, maybe like the festival circuit. For example, maybe releasing music around South by Southwest is not the smartest timing to do that, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So make sure you get in before or wait till after. So basically, I worked with a radio plugger who's kind of been a really very solid and excellent partner
Nice.
for a lot of this stuff. So I started with the radio plugging thing, and I found that to be hugely effective and beneficial. Worked with some people on sort of the
And
social sides.
and
Sorry.
really, really quick,
Hmm.
that plugging, that's not something that people hear a lot, I would say.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that a little bit more before you go on to the next piece?
Absolutely. So essentially, I provide my music to this this radio plugger. We go through what's available. We then strategize what we're going to do as singles. In my case, we decided to do everything as a single, but instead of doing it as an album, I split it up into three EPs, and I sort of grouped the music into slightly different worlds that were sort of related to each other, but represent my artistic voice. So the radio plugger's job is they help you craft the story a bit about what each track is, well, in my case, what each track was about. What is it saying about me? I used each track to tell a different part of my story. And then essentially they take the music and they start pitching to, high level radio producers, DJs, and things like that, who they are, well connected with. And why that was so important, I think, for me is just because the type of music I make, there's a very large world of tastemakers who have large audiences and can then play that song that I have on their station, which then gets, broadcast to a wider audience. If I
Hmm.
can give one example,
Yep.
the first single I released is my track called Ride the Dragon.
Love
I,
that one, by the way. I'm a fan
that,
personally.
thank you. That means a lot. Um, so that track, I remember saying to the radio plugger, I'm like, let's do the first single. Let's just see what happens. I had a healthy skepticism, like I just wanted to, I wasn't like going all in on everything. I'm like, let's just do one and see what happens. I can tell you right now, that track, week one, BBC Six, Huey Morgan plays that track. I then get comments on Instagram. Remember, I have 600 followers at this point. Hey, I just heard, like, and I was posting like track coming out, Ride the Dragon, blah, blah, blah. I had a little video and everything. So people start commenting on the video. Heard this track on Huey Morgan. What a great track. Start getting all this kind of traction. Then, so, that kind of led to some, not crazy, but some little bump. I go onto starting my TikTok, and then I start getting things going on there too. And then immediately that kind of, and even Huey like commented on the video, was like, thank you for playing my track. And he was like, dope track or something.
Hmm. That's awesome.
So that's just like one, remember, zero, right? So
You gotta start somewhere. That's a nice place. That's a nice win.
it
Early
was
win.
exactly. It was an early win that I did not, I thought it was going to take me 5 tracks to get within a shout of maybe, some sort of mainstream radio station like that. Um, so there's a little bit of, like the radio plugger services the music to, there's like top tier radio, there's KCRW, there are NPR stations, there are affiliated NPR stations, KEXP, there's all kinds of things. And then you've
Yep.
got like the plethora of maybe more like online radio, community radio, which is these guys, these like curators are really valuable. They are amazing. Like, firstly, They love new music. They're really supportive people. And, when there's always, we all get a buzz when we feel like we're discovering something that's,
Hmm.
new, I don't know if I'm novel, but something that's like, oh, what's this, So, it was also an unlock because I had a strategy going back to sustainability. I was taking 12 songs. I was going to release one every 4 to 6 weeks, maybe a few gaps here and there for Christmas and stuff like that. Like I wasn't going to release music around Christmas. Um, but this went lasted for 2 years, right?
Amazing.
So,
I think that's
and
great.
then each time I put out a track, it was Nick Marks. Oh, I love everything this guy's putting out. I started getting, you started to build on. So you're talking about momentum. It was something that really, I was able to build on that. Because I already had the runway and everything was kind of lined up. Now, when you said, I just want to say quickly, when you talked about like, did I throw things at the wall? In between sort of each track, like I was always throwing things at the wall, like, be like, all right, radio, cool, we're doing that. What if I pitch it to this outlet? Maybe I'd get, a blog review or something. So it's just kind of in between throwing things at the wall and seeing what would stick.
Nice. And so you took an approach that maybe not a lot of people are as familiar with, or would be at the top of their list because everyone's like, oh, I just need to get on Spotify playlist. It's the only thing that matters in the world. And obviously, the way that you went for that first track, going to the radio plugger, getting on, mentioned on, played on TV show, all of that was obviously a different way of getting your foot in the door and getting the attention in other communities, other mediums, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's great. It's not the only thing that you did, but it was a great place to start. Obviously, you tried other things as well, and then I know you ended up doing some digital marketing in a couple different fashions. Maybe
Yep.
spend a quick bit talking about that. You don't have to
Yeah.
go into the weeds on that, but if you want to hit the
Yeah.
highlights on what you did digitally.
Yeah. So with the playlisting thing, so firstly, I always pitch to Spotify, always, every song. And my third track got a got an editorial placement. So you never know. And actually, I
Yep.
have had five, or was it five tracks have been on Fresh Finds Jazz. And one of those tracks got listed on the best of 2024 Fresh Finds Jazz on Spotify.
Awesome.
So
And
remember, that's
for the
2 years of
for
like,
the people that are like, oh, it's a waste of time to submit to Spotify, yeah, it's a grind. It's definitely uh, the odds are maybe not in your favor if you're starting out, but
right.
if you don't do anything, you guaranteed don't have a shot of getting these types of victories you just mentioned.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And
Let's do
I would
classic
also,
quotes.
yeah, I would say that if you're going to pitch on Spotify, just make sure you're organized. Do it like a month in advance because they get who knows how many submissions. It must be insane. So do it
Unbelievable.
well in advance. That's what it is. So that's the Spotify thing. That doesn't cost any money. I've checked out platforms like Playlist Push and Submit Hub and Groover to varying degrees of success. I think they all have their strengths. In the beginning, I was kind of really throwing spaghetti at the wall. It's like, I don't know any of these playlist curators. Are they going to like the track? Are they even appropriate? So there's a lot of like just feeling out like what works and what didn't. I'm happy to say, like, after a while, you start to know like this curator, she's got an amazing playlist of these artists. I should pitch to her. Or this guy has a great, selection of neo soul tracks on his thing and he gets a lot of listeners. I'll pitch to them. Doesn't always work, but it's definitely worth, doing. So I think, being realistic about like, okay, I've got this much in my budget, I'm not going to pitch to everybody, but I'm going to be selective about that.
Hmm.
Another couple of other strategies that I ran, and you talked about our collaboration with Rise. I've used the exposure campaign and the conversion campaigns on Spotify. Found those to be hugely beneficial, especially in terms of getting Spotify followers. And that's a bit of a long-term thing as well, because the more followers you get, then each track you put out, you've got more people it's going to be served to in the beginning. So again, we started at 0 and now I'm up to like, well, I should know my numbers, but it's like 7,500. It's somewhere in there, followers. So I know when I put a track out, boom, 7,500 people, it's going to be served on their, release radar, which makes a big difference. My track current location at the start of the year, we were talking about it before. came out, and in the first day had 5,000 streams in the first day,
Amazing.
which
Yeah.
for me was like, that's, I didn't do anything. I put music out. I didn't,
Yeah, and the big thing with that is that's coming from your your internal fan base, right? And
yeah,
the thing that's great about Spotify is if you can get that early validation from listeners who know about you, then the
right.
chances of getting more traction in other areas of Spotify certainly go up.
Yeah,
And the other thing about the Rise campaigns that I would suggest and plug is that you mentioned like more of a long-term strategy. So it's not spending tons of money on, one song or one campaign, but how do you spread out a modest budget over a longer period of time and just put a
yeah,
little bit behind each
yeah,
release that you're doing? And we've seen not just with you, but just overall data, the artists that do campaigns in that way, they're running subscriptions at a modest
right.
budget and always, continuing to put out new music and, shift the focus to each new song. All of that. We've had the absolute best case studies going about it that way than the people who go, oh, I think this song's really great. I'm going to put a budget one time on one campaign here. Oh, this next one, maybe I don't want to market this one as much. I don't have the interest in it. I'm not going to plug the budget on this one. I'm going to skip it and do the next one. And then, 3 months,
Yeah,
4 months later, they do another one. They kind of throw something at it, and it does not work as well as a consistent strategy, which uh, should be no surprise, but it
right.
is worth mentioning for sure.
Yeah, if I can also add to that, Tim, like I remember when I finished that, what was going to be the album, and everyone was like, "When's it coming out? When's it coming out?" And I was like, "Just hold your horses. Like I'm figuring it out." And because I had this strategy, the subscription campaign worked really well because I was paying. It was almost like I was just paying this monthly thing, and then I could put out as many tracks as I wanted. And because I already knew, oh, I've got this many tracks coming out, it was much more efficient, much more effective in terms of running the campaign. And then even actually, now that we're just reminding me, there were a couple of months where I didn't have, or I didn't want to release music in those months, but I had the instrumental versions of a couple of, rap tracks, let's say. So I
Hmm.
put those out and I used my subscription campaign because it was still running and I could.
Right.
You can put, you can use the subscription campaign as much as you want while it's live.
Yep. So you were able to put out some bonus content that maybe you
Right.
didn't have scheduled originally.
Cost benefit or expected value, whatever you want to say, like the ratio, the more tracks you put out to the subscription campaign, then the better value it is. If you just do a 3 month subscription campaign, you put out 2 songs, or you do a one off and then a one off and then a one off. It's like those become, dollar to track ratio. It's like it's expensive or more expensive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm gonna tie something back together. So
Yeah.
on this section, it's great to hear you've done your fair share of experimenting with different types of platforms at different, varying degrees of success on each one, and you've figured out, hey, this platform, I have a strategy for. This is how I like to use it. Rise has its own, whatever. There's different ways that you've gone about that. So you sort of recap there. And I think everybody needs to find their own happy medium of what they're good at, what
Yeah.
platforms and tools work well for them versus don't, or things where
Right.
they get response. Like in your case,
Right.
hey, there's a curator that has a killer playlist that I know I need to hit every time, right? And so there's
Right.
just certain things that you do, and you've learned those by trial and error, which is awesome.
Totally.
And it's the best way is to get your hands dirty. So earlier when we spoke about this, you mentioned that there was sort of, and I'm circling back to the beginning where
Hmm.
when you first started deciding, hey, I'm going to start releasing music and transition from a behind the scenes creator to a public profile,
Right.
and building a brand and all that.
Yeah.
In that process, you said it's sort of like a self-fulfilling system, like an ecosystem of like, hey, now I posted this thing, I released this song, somebody could find me, and now it's in showing up in your physical real life as well,
Yeah.
with those tie-ins. If you want to talk about that life cycle a little bit.
Sure. So I've been an artist who likes to kind of diversify. So I love scoring, whether it's film, TV, documentary, podcast, you name it. And I love writing music and I love collaborating with other people and arranging other people's music and so on. So these worlds, for me, there's overlap and then sometimes they kind of exist in their own as their own entities. So when I now, score a, some sort of project and then my name's on it, people can go, oh, I like the music. Who is that guy? And then they go to Spotify and then they're introduced to a world that's actually, also like my artistic world, like the music that I also love to make. And so then there's kind of a nice crossover symbiosis where, all by the same token, someone might hear my artistic stuff and be like, who is this? Who's this guy? And then they happen to read like on the bio, like, oh, he does like film stuff too. And then, oh, he just did West Hampton. It was at the Tribeca Film Festival. Like that. So it's kind of like each thing is to help each other, but also largely, Tim, it's probably no surprise. I just love making music. So I'm trying to maximize the amount
Hmm.
of time I get to spend making, music that both artistically is what I want to do, but also, like there's some kind of fit to like there's a scene that I feel part of, whether it's the, jazz crossover hip hop scene or, there's a whole ecosystem of beats in the world, on all the DSPs that we all know about. And, some of my music fits nicely into that. And also like I grew up listening to film scores, so I like orchestral stuff. So I do that too. And that goes somewhere else. So it's kind of like, I remember someone saying to me like a producer or something, it's like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I like to do all these things. And they kind of looked at me like, I don't really care if you do all those things. I just need to know what you do. I need to put a label on you. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I thought, well, I don't really know what I'm going to label myself. Maybe I can just do a lot of different things and have them out there and then let the audience kind of, find their own meaning in the music and then go, oh, he's really this thing or he's that thing. And actually he's all of it. Let the music kind of do the talking in that regard.
Yeah, and I think that you're casting a lot of lines in the water in different places you like to fish, and
Right.
you're getting wins in just different places. And I think that the diversification that you have is really valuable. And I think so many people get caught up in like, oh, there's only one way. It's just I've got to blow up on TikTok, and that's the path. I have to get on all the Spotify playlists. That's the only way. And truly, taking all the shots you can is very helpful. Trial and error, finding out where you can get
Totally.
your victories. But all of these things are, um, in the end, they all get tied in together, and there ends up being crossover, and it builds an ecosystem and a brand in different mediums. And it's cool because in this conversation that's been relatively short, we've already touched on radio plugging, television shows, playlists, film festivals, and scoring. We've talked about social media. We've talked about playlist pitching platforms, social and digital ads. Like there's so many different components in such a very short period of time over the past 2 years that you've been building a brand that
You
you've
become you
already,
become your own record label.
yeah. Oh, and I wrote on here, not on a label in parentheses, good.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not opposed to it, but just so far, whenever I've pitched my music, it's always been, "Hey, man, love the music, just the roster's full, don't have any space." And like if I'm going to be with a label, or if for any artist out there who wants to be with a label, you make sure it's a good partnership. Make sure it's something that they're offering that you're not able to do yourself, and that they can do a good job of it. Because just the swag of the brand of being on a label, maybe it's really helpful. Maybe it does open doors. Or maybe you just end up on the bottom shelf and then your music's tied up, depending on the deal you sign. I don't know. One thing, Tim, I also want to add that I did, which I think could be useful for people to think about, because I certainly didn't know about this, is to make your own playlist.
Oh
Make it on
yeah, yeah,
Spotify.
absolutely.
And this is
Yeah,
something I
talk
did, and I
about
found it
that. Yeah.
real. Yeah. So this was sort of put to me like, hey, you should make your own playlist and put artists who, are similar to the kind of music you make, or even just your influences or things that inspire you. And so I did that, and I kind of sprinkled in my own, my own music in there too. And one of the things that Rise has is a playlist growth thing, which I did for a little bit, and it was great because it made these really like efficient, effective digital ads that then I was getting people come kind of following the playlist in a way that on my own, I mean, I don't know if I would have been able to do it, but yeah, it just means that I don't have to pitch my music all the time now to everybody and I have my own playlist that I control. And, it grew to about 2,200 followers and it's still sitting there. And I just add my tracks to it. People go there, they stream it. Then there's sort of associations of different artists. So I think it's also that way kind of helps to, you know, like I don't know if it trains the algorithm in any way, but it starts to notice, oh, this artist next to that artist. Maybe there's
Sure. I think
some,
there's some affiliation within the
yeah,
Spotify system that way, and
right,
the playlist growth campaign on Rise is interesting because our customers for it are almost exclusively record labels, brands, any other like distributors, companies that have a roster, right? And then they want to put all of their roster music into a playlist that they
yeah,
own, they curate, they control,
right,
and we do have super effective, affordable ads that grow those playlists and get a lot of streams per follower, typically, if the playlist is good. And that's not something that a lot of independent artists try. They don't think of that as a viable strategy for themselves. But I know that you're not alone in that, that we have some people who have recognized that as a great opportunity to build another asset, another source of traffic within Spotify. And again, with the associations of other artists, you actually get to control that yourself, which is a
hmm
nice benefit within that
yeah.
strategy.
And I guess at a certain point, if you decide to kind of change the playlist, you can end up just making it like this is like you have a big enough catalog. It's like this is just my catalog playlist now. If you wanted to do that, like you don't have to always
Yep.
have other people's music on there. Can serve different purposes at different times. I guess is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm glad you remembered. I had made a note, but it was too vague on my screen to remember exactly what it was. I would get too scrappy with writing this stuff down sometimes. Um, cool. So, if you had to wrap this up with a summary, with some takeaways,
hmm
some reflections for people to hear played back to them, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think if first identify what your kind of main pain points are, when it comes to putting music out. If it's, I don't know if people will like my music, then the antidote is action. Put something out, see what happens. Because every track takes on a life of its own. And I can say every time I put out a track, it does something completely unexpected that I could not predict. Every time. And when I think like, oh, maybe that radio DJ who liked this track, they'll like this track, they don't play it,
Hmm.
but someone else did, you know. So
That's
that's
awesome.
one little takeaway, and I think that if the sort of, I mean, this has been a very a conversation focused on how to get it out there. So sort of like I'm just going to say the business side of, for lack of a better word. I don't the kind of the like how do I the rollout kind of thing, you know. What my experience is not a formula. There are going to be things in there that could be helpful that I encourage people to like test out and try and just see what works for you. But ultimately, I think if I can leave one takeaway, it's that you're probably going to be the best person to figure out what works for your music better than anybody else. And that is through the trial and error, like we talked about, and
Yeah,
and just
being hands-on, being proactive,
and
being
building a
open-minded.
little bit of think in 3 to 6 month intervals. Like, I'm going to start releasing music. What is it? It's June. Okay, so by October, I'm going to release my first single. Then I'm going to do it in late November. Take a break over December. January's a little sleepy, so I'll wait till late January. And then so all of a sudden, it's like, cool. I already know what I'm going to do between now and March. Sweet. Now I just have to execute, what I'll talk about content wise. It becomes way less of a like, kind of a burden if it does for some people. At least for
Hmm.
me, thinking last minute and trying to do everything on the fly was kind of I found that challenging. But having a strategy and a plan, and then being able to just drop things in that happen, like, oh, I just got on another Spotify playlist. I released a record with this great producer in London called Daylight Robbery, and we got on the morning rhythm playlist on Spotify. So you just don't know where these things lead. And definitely, I think one thing kind of builds on another thing. So that's why I'm a big advocate of like setting out a plan, even if it's pretty loose and bare bones. Just be like, all right, the track will come out then, and these are the things we'll do around it. Cool. After that, we'll do the next one. And this is the story I want to tell. I want this song to be the vehicle to tell this part of my story.
Hmm. I like that, structuring the story that you want to tell, but then putting it out there in different ways and seeing, being open-minded to how and where it responds and where you get your traction from is awesome. And consistency is not a word that we've necessarily used directly in this conversation, but I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways throughout this is that you have been very consistent with everything that you've done for the past 2 years, and that ball has just started rolling and getting bigger. I am very curious to see, 12 months from now, where you'll be sitting and what kind of accolades and successes and growth that you've had in another 12 months, because I know you'll still be consistent for the next year. And that's really what it is. It's just doing it. And you've been a great example of somebody who doesn't just talk about it or complain about platforms or banter. You've taken action and it's paid off, and it's going to keep doing that. And you're
I
making
live
great
in the
music, which helps.
Thank you very much. Got to
Yeah.
live in the world kind of as it is in that regard. Like, just, all right, these are the platforms, these are, and yeah, having clarity, I mean, you run a business, you got to have clarity, right? About what are the goals, what are the objectives, and you're not trying to solve every problem today. It's all about like, what do I need to do to get there? And then that might be like a 6-month process. You get there and you go, cool, I'm here. I don't want to just coast here. Now we want to grow to another level. I think when I started with Rise, we didn't have the community wasn't a thing like yet, but it's
Yeah.
grown. And now it's like, wow, there's a whole, you know, environment where artists can come and we can exchange ideas, we can share things. I mean, there's, we're all open books here.
Yeah. Well, everybody's trying to figure it out, man. And it's great to be a part of the process because it's always changing, and that's what keeps it a little bit interesting. In the end here, I want to wrap it up with just a plug or two or three or seven. Throw out, yeah, all the plug things that you want.
Thanks for that. So I've released 3 EPs. It's a trilogy series called Cinematic Chromatics, Volumes 1, 2, and 3. As we've discussed, you can find it on all the DSPs, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Tidal. As an artist, the best way to support the music is to buy it on places like Bandcamp. So I appreciate anyone who connects with the music and wants to support in that way.
Awesome.
Had a record come out with this London producer, Daylight Robbery. That's on Melting Pot Music, a fantastic record label based out of Germany. And stay tuned because coming up, I've got a couple mixtapes in the works, which are going to be slated for release later this year, early next year, which will then be followed up by a full-length LP, my first one. So stay tuned.
Plans for a whole year to come, as we just discussed. And then profiles, we said it earlier, but the handles, tags, names, where did they find you? Website, any of that stuff?
Yeah, so N Marks Music, N, the letter N, Marks Musik, is the handle for Instagram. I mean, I'm on Facebook. Mostly I'm active on Instagram, TikTok as well. Instagram and TikTok. And then my website, nmarksmusic.com. Yeah, I can share the links with you and you can add them on here.
Awesome. This has been fun. Glad we got to sit down and do it. And that's a wrap. I'm going to leave it there, baby.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Here we go.